think of it
in
differently.
shock.
Want to skip to budget for 2022? Do we want to?
Hey, hang on a minute because I have a little bit of context to provide to everybody before we get started and stuff. I'd just really rather wait for Melissa to be here, so just wait another couple minutes.
think they were saying. Oh, yeah. Did you read that?
No, it was in Charlottesburg that morning.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
Not that I ever some adults.
You don't have money? You're late.
Yeah, I got this, here was our
How about you can put it on
full band on the bridge.
and they have what on?
87. There's the full band on the Harrisburg Bridge. So,
How come it wasn't in the paper? News Chronicle?
it's going to be,
Oh, it's going to be. Okay, okay.
yeah.
Oh, they look nice.
Yeah.
It's really the only thing that is
These new uniforms, they hard to keep clean?
using.
They're horrible.
What do you mean horrible?
It's horrible. They're
Keep-
cheap. They're not gonna last.
Wait a minute. I thought we bought them on your recommendation.
No, that was before me. Materials terrible.
I thought that's what we wanted. We wanted a better uniform.
They opted for cheap.
I think we have pulled up, Melissa.
I mean, they look.
Yeah.
All right.
It's going to be hard to clean.
We're going to begin this special committee of the whole meeting. I wanted to provide a little bit of context for why we're here and sort of what this project is that we're discussing, especially for those who may be tuning in at home or watching the YouTube later, to have a little bit of context. So, almost exactly 24 months ago, this board entered into a contract with SiteLogic to begin a construction project, which was centered around our middle school. The budget for that project was $14.5 million, or not to exceed $14.5 million. But not all of that $14.5 million was going to come from the district. $10 million was going to come from the district was going to fund through a bond offering. But the other approximately $4.5 million came from ESSER monies. And you might remember that ESSER is, I have no idea what it stands for, but it's part of a federal government thing that was COVID relief monies that could be used for specifically for capital improvements. So the scope of this project was to expand and renovate the middle school cafeteria, to give us 6 new classrooms on the middle school, to replace a whole bunch of windows and to do some storefront upgrades, which are upgrades to like kind of the front of the building. There were a number of asset protection projects, so those are the kind of invisible things having to do with like the HVAC system and other sorts of systems that are sort of hidden from view in the school, but nonetheless are important for making it work, replacing equipment and that sort of thing. And then the final piece, as I remember it, was that there was to be a revised traffic loop that was to help traffic for buses coming in and out of the middle school, and also for folks dropping kids off and picking them up. And generally, we refer to this as the parent loop. So all of these projects, with the exception of the last piece, the parent loop, have been completed. The parent loop, I think that the budget, and this I'm not positive on, but I think that the original budget for that was $2.5 million. But then the original drawings that came in for that, we realized like that was just too much. Like it was coming in way over budget for what we had originally planned, and so the board was like, no, we got to make some revisions here because it was coming in way over expectations, and revisions were made, but we still do not have a completed parent loop. So. The project was coming to completion this year, and of course we got into school, in August, and we have this beautiful new building and lots of great stuff that's there. But prior to that, this board had not seen a sort of full accounting of the costs for this project. We were aware that it was going over budget. I'm not sure when we first became aware of that, but in a presentation of July of this year, SiteLogic came and said, like, look, this is $1.1 million over budget at this point. We still hadn't seen a detailed accounting. We didn't sort of know where all of that over budget bit was. There were kind of like bits and pieces, but not like a sort of complete picture. And so, you know, over the course of the summer, I believe, well, I should say, during these 2 years, really, there's been, I don't know, lots of things that have happened. We've had personnel changes, you know, at SiteLogic and with us and at EI, who's the accounting, or sorry, not the accounting, the architectural firm that has been doing our design work. And just like sort of along the way, like somehow we just haven't, the district has not had a sort of complete picture of where these overruns were. And I, you know, this board was sort of promised that like that we were going to see that, and there was an expectation, I don't know if it was appropriate or not, but there was an expectation that we were going to be getting that first, you know, sort of late spring, then during the summer, and then finally, here we are in November. And so then we had a committee of the whole meeting a week ago, and SiteLogic presented, but this board wasn't satisfied with sort of what we were seeing. We didn't like get the detail that we were expecting in regards to this project. And of course, we have a contract with SiteLogic for continuing construction projects, you know, finishing up a little bit of stuff at the middle school and doing a bunch of stuff in the high school. And the district, you know, the board wants to be confident that whatever issues that there were that may have, you know, I don't know, disrupted our having a full accounting of costs, that those systems are corrected and that we are in a good place for us to continue. So that's the sort of context. I hope that I was accurate in presenting all of that. And so now Melissa Kolstock from SiteLogic is here, and so give the time to her to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goetz. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for your patience this evening. I always try to have a cushion of time whenever I travel, but unfortunately, tractor-trailer traffic on 81 was not working with me today. So I apologize for my tardiness, and I appreciate your patience in waiting for me to come here tonight to start the presentation. That was a great summary of the projects and kind of how we got to today. We did revisit some of that information before, but I think we're all kind of here just to kind of talk about what's in front of you. So everyone, most of what we'll be referring to is this document here. And just for the presentation, we've kind of broken it up on the different slides. The format for this doesn't necessarily fit a PowerPoint presentation, so kind of take a look at it in different chunks. Joining me tonight is Rochelle Fennell. She's the Director of Operations for SiteLogic, and she was the one overseeing the project. Before we really get into a lot of the details, what you're seeing is a lot of hard work on Michelle's part, working very, very closely with Joanne and Christy and EI and K&W to really hone and clarify, you know, information that will hopefully provide some transparency for you tonight. Sorry, could you advance the slide? Thanks. So today we'll take a look at the overall budget to bid results comparison. We have a detailed project analysis that we'll be looking at, which is in front of you. And then we'll talk a little bit about the bid market and bid results. You know, we'll talk about your project in the context of other projects that were being built around the same time. And phase 3, which is middle school, high school, how we plan on protecting the budget. We'll get into that as well.
Excuse me, do you have any extra ones of these?
An extra one? Sure.
No, I have it. I just wondered, two new board members, do they have a copy? Could they follow along?
Thank you.
Back there in the...
Leslie, could you, oh, never mind.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
So it's important to understand where we started. And as Dr. Goetz had said, you know, initially there was a budget that was set out around $10 million from Shippensburg School District that they would undertake through a bond borrowing in addition to the $4.3 million in the ESSERS fund. Where we started was slightly higher than that. So right away, our budgets weren't aligned. I think at some point, SiteLogic was under the impression that there would be additional money through different programs that the district had identified. At one point, Ship Proud was kind of a special projects budget that we were taking into account, and we were overestimating what the budget would be. So right off the bat, we take ownership for that lack of alignment with our budget versus the district, because that is kind of a cascade of what we were looking at for budgets going forward. When we began our journey with the Shippensburg School District, we started through a study, a feasibility study. So it was this district-wide analysis of your facilities, and we were able to generate rough orders of magnitude for your facility needs. You might remember that as kind of that really thick binder that you all received at one point, and within that binder, you saw a list of kind of asset protection projects. Those projects were the basis of what ultimately became your middle school project. So we were working with those budgets going forward. And so what you're seeing on the budget column are the budgets that were generated from the study efforts that we identified. So line items 2 and 3 are making up your middle school project. The construction projects, what Dr. Goetz was alluding to. So it was all of your energy-related savings, your roof, your storefront, equipment, some finishes upgrade, in addition to your building additions and cafeteria expansion. When we look at the actual costs, and we're doing our comparison, so line item 1, we can see finance costs were not accounted for. Our middle school additions, the budget for that additions, the 4.3 was going to be your construction in addition to MEP work that was procured through the second GISA amendment. We can see those costs are not aligning with the actual costs. So the middle school additions, public bid was 3.4. Your GISA Amendment 1 was 6.3, and your GISA Amendment 2 was 2.18. There was a deduct alternate that we were able to pull out for your redundant electrical feed of 134,447. So for the building construction subtotals, we are at 10.8 at budget versus the 11.9 at our actual. Some of the things that are impacting this are what we're seeing as far as what the bid market was telling us at the time. So at the time we were bidding, your GISA Phase 1 amendment was March of 2022, okay? And your GISA Phase 2 amendment, which was like the balance of the work and your public bid, that was bid later. That was September, October. What we had seen in those 4 or 5 months between bidding your 2 different phases of construction was a lot of significant inflation within the bid market. We can get into those a little bit later, but that was a huge contributor to what we were seeing as being the project starting to get over budget. Your equipment costs for just your equipment were rising 40 to 70%. So things that we could have bid or maybe could have procured for you in March, by the time that we were building and getting ready to procure them months later, had already risen hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that was just that hyperinflation. This is a result of the global pandemic that we had just gone through. Those equipment inflationary prices were a direct result of the manufacturers responding to the inflation, the supply chain issues that were going on. This was hitting projects every single day. I have examples of that, but I wanted to let you know that even on bid day, while it looks like things were kind of coming in, they were still over budget because of what we were seeing on those bid market day conditions. Your professional services and soft costs, lines 6 through 13. Okay, these construction management fees had stayed the same, but the architect fees are slowly starting to increase, specifically on lines 8 and 9. These are attributed to the additional services that the project incurred. And these additional services are things like reimbursables on a project. This is design changes that are associated with change orders. Okay, so if there's a change order and your architect or engineer has to make a design change to support that change order, that's what you're seeing here. We're seeing things like the testing agency that ended up being in budget. We have change order contingencies, permits, fees, other, those all stayed pretty much level. The other piece was the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, where we're seeing we had set aside a budget, and then that budget or the desire of the district was to have a much larger scope for that to support those building additions. So now as we start to down total, we're starting to see what that looks like. Where we had originally budgeted about $12 million, we now see these overages of 13.1. So right away, soft costs and middle school construction projects starting to grow. And again, it's not a single line item that is increasing the budget on this. It is design changes, it is scope, it is decisions that are made about what you would like to procure, how you'd like to procure it. All of these items that we're looking at are tied to, the actual costs are tied to invoices that your professional services teams have provided to the district. So we're just rolling them up. We're not showing you every single invoice. If somebody is really interested in seeing, the breakout of invoicing, we can certainly provide that, but we're talking big numbers. That brings us to the middle school drive and the high school bus loop. Dr. Stevens, I'm sorry, wait, I have sorry.
Do you need the slide advanced?
Is it not working?
Yeah, okay. So that is taking us now kind of to the next piece of the middle school project, which is that middle school parent drive and the high school bus loop. Okay, as Dr. Goetz said, we originally had kind of set aside about $2.3 million for that. We had about $1.9 million in hard construction, and then the remainder of that was going to be the professional services or soft costs associated with putting that in place. Because of the actual costs of the middle school project, and throughout the phases of design and estimating for the middle school loop, was starting to see pretty clearly that the middle school loop was not going to comfortably fit within the budget that was originally allocated for the middle school project. So the design, the initial design came in right around $3 million. That was not acceptable to the district. So it was redesigned. Again, it came in over budget, I think right around $2.6-ish million. And so now it has been designed a third time. This time it's about $2.4 million with the latest estimate. So we're getting closer and closer to budget each time with the design, but again, those designs are incurring those additional services. And you can see what that looks like on line 16 under actual. So there's architect's fees, and then there's architect additional services which are related to the design. And so far, this project has incurred about $236,000. total program now for us. We had initially, been carrying that budget of 14.3 million. Now your actual costs are right at 13,427, which is a total middle school program. The understanding that the total actual district borrowing for the middle school was the 14,059. Through the exercise that Rochelle has gone through with Christy and Joanne and the architect and the engineer, they've realized that there are additional funds from that borrowing that have gone to other things outside of the middle school project. So that is something else that's kind of hitting that $14 million budget. Those are lines 21, 22, and 23. So you can see it's funding that was spent to K&W for their campus surveys, 2022 funding for this 2023 future project development. And then potential overpayment of consultants for the middle school loop of the 2022 borrowing. This is currently under review as we're rectifying that in the amount of $16,836. I'm sorry, Mrs. DeLong, I keep pushing that button and I can't quite get it to advance. Thank you. So the total spend for the middle school program so far to date, so it's construction-related costs plus the additional spend, is $13.653,680, which you can see there. What that means for the district is that there is a remaining balance of $405,423.16. What we've done is we've carried over the interest from the 2022 bond borrowing, which is $361,000 and $361,065. And we've added that together so that the total carryover for the next phase is close to $766,489. What we'd like to do now, and Mrs. DeLong, if you could, thanks. Okay, is take a look at kind of what we call the budget disruptions for the middle school. Okay, a lot of these are those items that we just talked about, but what we've done is we've just kind of broken them out in a little bit more detail. So what we're seeing now are kind of the breakdown. So the line items on the left-hand side correspond with the upper chart, and the cost or the budget is kind of subtracted from what we're saying is the middle school loop budget. So that's why that 2.3 is at the top. And then on the far right is kind of the detail, the budget disruptions for the high school. So right away, $240,000 for the finance costs that were not accounted for. Okay, that's where our budgets didn't align at the beginning. The second line item is the architect, engineer, additional services. This corresponds with line item 8 and 9, which is that architect, engineer, the change order, if they had to make any design changes. That next line item, the cost overage for the middle school project, the $1,049,300, this is where we're seeing everything that we were just talking about whenever we talk about bid day market conditions. Seeing that your equipment costs go up as far as procuring, so budgets that were assigned to that equipment for specific scopes of work versus the bid day results went up. Equipment cost, your general construction, material costs, and labor costs also going up anywhere from 25 to 60%. So overall construction, public school district construction going up, your project is no different. Additional services by the architect engineer not accounted for in the loop That's that 126,885 that you're seeing on line 16. Funding for other items we talked about, that's lines 21 through 23. In addition to that potential overpayment. The design fees for the middle school loop, so that's 5.6% of 1.9 million. Construction costs gets us to that 109,200. The add and deducts for the testing, change orders, permits, fees, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that is that $2,420. And then extra money in the budget that was not to be there because we were assuming the Ship Proud budget was coming into play. Unfortunately, we were incorrect. So that leaves that total remaining of the 405,423. Great. I just wanted to go back to 6. Okay, so on the presentation, what you can see are kind of what we were talking about that was hitting or affecting the project throughout the course of construction. We talked about that inflation. So your vendor markets, that's the impact of, on average, 10% every month going up in construction. It was unprecedented. We would present numbers one week, and then the very next week, things would have to change, just because of the volatility of your construction market. We talked about those equipment cost increases. One of the ways that we were able to mitigate this between your first phase Giza and your second phase of construction was reducing your equipment. We saw that steady rise in the market and the conditions. So when we talk about value engineering, this is one of those places that we saw that opportunity. Perfect instance would be your classroom addition. We originally had designed 2 rooftop DOAS units, but with the rise of the equipment, the budget could not support 2. So we elected to downsize to 1, okay, which is slightly more, it was like an oversized DOAS unit, so it was less than 2, but more than 1, so a larger, higher capacity DOAS unit that we were able to supplement for the design. Additionally, with that, you know, we did see unforeseen conditions on the project. So the water vault size increased to support the sprinklers within the cafeteria. We knew we would have to sprinkle that space. We had allocated a budget for it, but when the code officials came back, they said, actually, your water vault is not large enough. You have to put in a larger water vault. So that's what we did. In addition, another scope of work, unforeseen condition, was the sewer pump that had to be installed. Nowhere on any of the existing drawings did the elevation indicate that it was lower than it should have been. So there were design accommodations and scopes of work that had to be created so that the sewer pump could be installed. And then we talked about the general contractor, the material cost increased, 25 to 60% increased on those material costs. Your additions saw those primarily because that's where you were putting in things like your paint, your ceiling, your walls, your flooring finishes. That was weighted with those types of increases. And then the district also elected to choose a variety of alternates on bid day for the middle school additions. Okay, so I'm going to pause here because I feel like this is the drink from the fire hose, and I just want to give everybody a moment to ask their questions.
I have one. You knew I was going to have one. We started out with 14.3, right?
Yes.
Okay. We lost some money in between. They're going to be cheaper, right? I mean, we didn't have as much money as we thought.
So
I'll switch them up. Much better with that one.
Do you want to use Mrs. Wool, maybe Mrs. Woolmer can use your?
Go through everybody's. Yeah, there we go. There you go.
She's going to need that back then.
All right, I'm trying to figure out, we had certain amount of money set aside for the project, correct?
Yes.
Then you knew at the beginning that we didn't have enough money to do the project, correct?
I'm not sure how to answer
If it's
that.
14.3, and you said, you started, when the gentleman was standing there last time, which took a shock to me and everybody else, he said, we started out in the hole. I want to know, why did we start out in the hole?
That's a good question. Okay, now I understand why you're asking that. So at the time that we were setting the project budgets, the district had not yet borrowed from their bond borrowing. So the actual financing cost that's associated with bond borrowing, we were not carrying that as a line item.
Why would our finances affect you?
Because it affects the actual budget. So the budget that we had set forth,
Yes.
okay, was we were using round numbers, right? So we're setting forth, we're kind of painting with broad strokes whenever we set budgets for the project until the district secures the financing and knows what the actual cost of that is. So 4.3 for ESSERS, there was no, you weren't borrowing that, so you were getting every single cent of that ESSERS funding. The district's borrowing $10 million, okay, but there's a cost to that, $240,000. But we didn't know necessarily what that cost was, so we were just setting the budgets at, $10 million and $4.3 million were kind of the two, the $14.3 million budget that we were looking at.
Okay. Why didn't anybody come back to the board and tell us that we were starting in the hole? I mean, the projects, you couldn't do all the projects. Why, like the loop, Damon came up here and said, we didn't do the loop because of the price of fuel. We'd hold off until the fuel went down. I'm pretty sure that's what he said. I want to know, this, if you knew at the starting point, how come nobody came back to the board and said, we don't have the money? I didn't hear none of that. All I kept hearing was, we're at the budget or at the line or something. Never that we're going to be in the hole. So I'm trying to figure it out in my head. Can you explain that to me?
That's a good question, and I don't have a great answer for you. We absolutely should have come back once we noticed that there was not that alignment with that budget. I think that, we were working so hard to try to put a project out on the street for the district to have in place for this fall, that when we were estimating what the project was going to be, our estimates, okay, had not caught up with what the market was doing. So the market was constantly going up, and our estimates were always kind of a little bit behind. And we're hoping to account for that, to kind of set accurate budgets. But the way that the market was increasing, I mean, it was...
That's where everybody.
Yes,
I understand.
yeah. So that, I mean, our budgets were never going to catch up to the inflation and the escalation that was occurring because it just kept going up.
But your spending was going higher than the money allotted. If you got $1,000 and you're spending more than $1,000, wouldn't you know that? I mean, wouldn't that come to light? But you can't keep. I see the estimate keeps going up, and I understand the cost keeps going up. But they're at a point. I mean, I would hope you could have seen that as eventually there will not be enough money to cover that.
Yes, and we really started to see that with the parent loop. When we were estimating the parent loop and it was coming in higher and higher and higher, despite the design being decreased, we started to see that. And that started to bleed into the designs for the middle school and what we were seeing. And that's when we started to look at different ways to try to keep as much of your project within budget as possible. And one of the ways that we did that was through creating a hybrid project for the middle school additions. And when I say a hybrid project, I mean we were combining a traditional public bid project, which is your additions, with a GISA scope of work, which was pulling a lot of the MEP that is in the middle school additions. So the mechanical work that's associated with the additions, as well as the equipment procurement. We were pulling that into the GISA. So we were trying to make sure that the public bid portion of the project did not exceed your ESSERS funding. By doing that, we were able to offset a lot of the impacts of the inflation, but by reducing the equipment and with these strategies, we weren't able to eliminate it entirely. And when we communicated, budgets to the board in April, we were just over, $11 million, and that didn't even include the site work for the middle school, high school. That was April of last year.
So April last year, we were 11 million. We had spent up 11 million, or April this year.
We were tracking the project as trending towards $11 million. Yes, without the middle school parent loop.
Parent loop.
I have a question regarding the bid process. Am I wrong in my information of when we bid for projects, that kind of locks us into a price? So when we keep talking about inflation, whenever these contractors are bidding for a job, they would take into account the bidding. So when we bid a project and we are locked in, that is the price. So if the price would be 11.9, if a contractor locks in at that price, they are committed to that price, that they don't get to put in change orders to reflect some of that, the inflation. Like, that's kind of their responsibility, or they would eat the cost for anything that is kind of over budget with materials, or if they underestimated the cost for flooring, lighting.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your question in pieces. Through and we can get into this a little bit because we have some slides to help kind of clarify the difference between public bid and GISA, but to answer your question, the way that public bid works is lowest responsible bidder. So Pennsylvania has procurement laws, and it's one of like 3 states that public bid is through lowest responsible bidder. So what does that mean for you? It means that whoever is the lowest responsible bidder on your project generally gets it. It's very, very difficult to get around that, but that's just how it is. So what you're not seeing whenever on bid day is that contractor is going through your project. They are also looking at potential change orders. They know what they can assign a change order to. So while their base bid might be something they know throughout the course of a project, they could potentially apply for change orders on a project for several different reasons. That is part of what we are trying to mitigate whenever we use the hybrid construction or GISA on a project, is avoiding those change orders throughout the cost of a project.
So I guess another question is, when we're talking about, GISA stage 1, stage 2, so Site Logic has an energy arm.
Yes.
Also would benefit from a district doing a GISA part of our loan. Like, what is the benefit? I mean, looking at from my position of certain, like, I can't vote for a certain individual if they would be family because they would have a financial gain.
Right.
Does Site Logics have a financial gain by doing the Giza due to their interest of kind of also with the Giza because they're also would be awarded their own Giza contract?
So that's a really good question, and we answer it a lot. And what I'm trying to do is kind of skip forward to show you how we illustrate that a little bit.
Tell me how far to go.
Let's talk about this. I'm going to answer your question through my presentation. How's that? So I'm going to just put a pause on that so we can talk about this. But before we get into hybrid construction, public bid, and Giza, any questions on kind of?
Can I just ask a follow-up question to Steph's first question? So Steph said, hey, you know, if you got a contract, if you got, put something out for bid and you get a certain bid in, then the contractor, you know, has a responsibility to complete the project at that bid. And I think I get that, and I think you said like, hey, there's maybe some kind of sneaky ways to make it a little bit more than that. But what I heard you say earlier, which I guess I didn't quite understand, but I'm understanding better now, is we set this budget at the beginning of 2022, but a lot of things didn't get bid until like 8 or 9 months later. And so you might have a budget of $2 million for a piece, but then the lowest responsible bid comes in at, you know, 2.25. Still, I mean, that's the lowest responsible bid, so you either do it or you don't do it, right? And so, I mean, to Fred's point, he's like, hey, if that lowest responsible bid comes in at $250,000 over, I feel like I should have known. So, like, yeah, I get it, costs go up, but you got to tell me that the cost went up when the cost went up. So, am I understanding this correctly, how that works?
Yeah, so once a contractor bids your project, they are locked into that price, just like you said. It's before that, when you set your budget a year and a half ahead, it's what influx happens between when you set that budget and when you actually get that bid is where the prices are going crazy with supply chains, equipment, people couldn't get stuff, change on a daily basis. Every day it was a different, one day it was equipment, next day it was paint, next day it was insulation for roofing. It never stayed the same, so we never knew, you know, where things were going. It was so hard to estimate at that time. But once that price comes in, that is the real price. Up until then, it is completely an estimate. And like I said, with how crazy things were going over time, with inflation every month, and I don't know, do you have that graph that Mike had? Yeah, so there, I mean, in 4 months, the inflation, right at the time you guys were bidding phase 1 of the Giza, it was crazy. And prices were going up. Contractors were covering their butts because, you know, if they didn't get the equipment on time, then they have to do temporary means, you know, to get you guys in school. So she's going to show you a slide here, and it's going to illustrate what was happening in right there. In the spring of 2022, when you were bidding your Giza, I mean, every month it was going up from 8%, 9%. None of that was originally accounted for in your original budget. So that's where you get that influx and where that change comes, not after you get the bid.
How would that delta be communicated, though, typically? I mean, if something came in, what's the normal procedure? I think what I'm hearing from the board is, you know, like not hearing that delta, the difference between what was bid and the actual, or you know, what was budgeted versus the actual bids themselves.
So that happens a couple different ways. I mean, we have the bid opening, and then we supply the district with the bid tab. Before the bid opening, there are budgets that are assigned to kind of the different packages that are going out, or what you should be expecting to vote on to approve as far as contracts. So last April, you voted to approve the Giza Phase 1 amendment. We showed you a budget of, I think it was like $6.6 million, and then the actual Giza amendment was 6.3. next time we were preparing to go out to bid, showed the district kind of the balance of the budget. Don't remember which month we presented that, but it was right before the middle school additions were going out to bid. So that would have been in probably September or August of last year to say we're getting ready to go out to bid. You have to approve us to go out to bid for public bid. This is the budget. This is what we should expect. This is the scope of work. And then you would vote to approve the bids when they came in the following months.
I guess for me, I'm still confused. If you knew you sent out a bid for a thing and the bid comes back higher, what do you do then?
If a bid comes back higher,
Let's say the electrical work on the middle school come out higher than you estimated it's going to be.
yeah.
What did you do then?
I mean, we presented it to the board to say, is this still a project that you'd like to pursue? This middle school additions project was a little unique because we actually rebid it. So when it was bid out the first time, there were 2 bidders. The second time, it was rebid. There were actually 3 bidders, and it came back lower. So there was, a little bit of a silver lining with the rebid because you got a lower price. Everybody had to go back and sharpen their pencils. But that still did not offset, a lot of what we were seeing with the inflation and the costs of all of the different material and equipment pricing going up.
Is it normal for a job to be bid out more than once? Because
In the last year, it's been normal for it to be bid out more than once. And Mrs. DeLong, I don't know if you can. We're going to kind of get back to. I think it's slide 7 on the presentation. So here's what I'd like to do is show you the bid market conditions and budget overages. This is across the state of PA. This is a selection of different projects that we had bid out. And you can see it ranges from March 16th all the way to your project. And what we're seeing are the bid dates on the left, the district, their original budgets, and the results. So March, what we saw, very similar to kind of that inflation, we're seeing just a very slight increase in the differential. So red means they're over. So the first couple clients of ours were over 2%. Then as we get about mid-year, what we really start to see are those inflationary costs affecting projects where estimates and budgets that were signed are not what the bid day results are saying. And this is where we're starting to see everything starting to go a little crazy based on the markets. So we're seeing upwards of 30-45% over budget. What we can see, obviously the last line item is your middle school additions. So this is just the building only, right? Because we didn't bid out the middle school, the parent loop. So these are your construction costs, so you're 9% over. So you can see that, yes, you're over budget. Are you as much as other districts that were bidding at the same time? No, you're not. And again, typical overages on projects occur because of everything that we've been talking about. Long lead items, your supply chain manufacturing, the labor shortages in the workplace, those volatile market conditions, and then those budget mitigation strategies that we try to implement as soon as we start to see this. So early procurement, which is what this district did with that ESA amendment. You procured a lot of your equipment as soon and as early as you could because that market was starting to get a little crazy. The phasing and scheduling of work we implemented in addition to the value engineering options. One thing to note is there is an economy of scale in bidding projects. You can see that kind of on the kind of first 2, probably the second, the Great Valley School District. I mean, they have like almost $100 million that they're working with, and whenever you have such a vast economy of scale, that helps kind of drive down the effects on like smaller projects. And then also the hybrid project approach was working to your benefit in this instance because of how we could negotiate with subcontractors to make sure that we are, that you're not overpaying and you're getting the best value for your project.
I got a question on your construction cost and the material cost and the machinery stuff. Did your bidders not get, I mean, you're a pretty big company, did you not get the dealers say, hey, we're gonna have a 10% increase this month?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. Yeah,
come we
we
didn't
do.
get that
I just got an email, Train, specifically on, it wasn't your project, it was the project right after, Twin Valley. I don't think we have it on here. Email from them saying, in the last 15 months, we've seen 70% increase in equipment costs.
Right, but I mean, I get the same thing with concrete. They'll tell me concrete's going up 10% the 1st of July.
No, only certain trades were, you would see, I mean, everything was going up, but not the same. So like Rochelle said, we
I
never
use
knew if it was
steel, too.
paint.
I use
never-
steel too for swimming pools, and they told me that steel's going up. But they give me that warning. They tell me it's going up. They just don't bang, you know, here you go. They tell me that. They let me know that
Yes.
well in advance. So if I'm selling something, I know that this is going to be 15% more, 25% more.
Yes.
Right
And
up front.
that's your contractors that are bidding that work. And we, as our estimators, are trying to keep up with that. But our estimate, okay, and taking into account all of the inflation, we're doing our best to estimate that. But your contractors are putting, at times, some things into their numbers when they're bidding this that we normally wouldn't as your construction manager when we're estimating it. So they are, you know, probably putting inflation, but they might be padding it a little bit more with additional inflation just to cover any price increase that might occur from bid day until when they're actually procuring the work and need it on site.
Even at that, if you know you got a big job, if I know I got a big job coming up, I call a concrete plant and say, hey, I got this big job. They lock me in at a price. That's where it's going to be.
Yes, so you're negotiating. You have that ability to negotiate that. On the public bid side of construction, serving as your construction manager, we do not have that ability. We are beholden to the lowest responsible bidder who can elect to provide whatever price he would like for your project and bid it that way. Now, as your ESCO and your energy services contractor, we do exactly what you're doing. We go to the subcontractors, we go to the manufacturers, we go to any vendor, and we have our estimate, and then we ask them to price the work. And when we see that discrepancy, we go in very fine detail, line by line by line. Rochelle's actually the one that does this, and she could speak to it much better than I could. But she is looking at every single line item that will incur a cost to the project and demand to know why is it so much higher than our estimate. And that's how she's driving the value up and the price down on projects. That does not happen on public bid side.
I will also tell you on the EASA side, even when we're doing all that, and you sign a contract with us, I still have pricing going up until I order it, and I have to, so we don't come back to the district after our contract signed, even if the prices go up and during this time, again, they were going all over, and never knew what day, what product it was going to be. So we have had product increases after we sign our contract, and we holding their, oh, sorry, thank you. They were not holding their price for 60 days, but that, is something that was just, at that time, we couldn't account for it. We just had to give you the price, and then we did our work. And on the GISA side, I can tell you, phase 1, you guys did save money. There are no change orders. We did find change orders. We took care of that because that's the risk that we have to take. So there is a difference between public bid and GISA. You do save money. It is a good way to go, especially with the early procurement, because there is still equipment out there now that is a year out. Switchgear, over a year out. Generators, over a year out. And the only way you can do projects is doing some early procurement on equipment. So it is a good thing. I know I know it's new, but your phase 1 and phase 2 and the public bid as a hybrid was really successful all the way around, I believe.
I have a question, which I always do, but the middle school, was the loop included in the middle school or not?
As far as what? The budget?
Budget.
Yes, it was originally planned and budgeted to be a part of the $14.3 million.
Okay.
Okay, and as the construction project started to kind of unfold and we were getting away from budgets and into actual contract numbers, real numbers, bid day numbers, it became clear that that middle school loop and the high school bus loop were not going to fit into the budget. And we knew that because their estimates were also over the budget. So it was two things. The design was over the designated budget, and then the budget for your construction started to, the actual costs for construction started to exceed what was originally budgeted.
That's for me, part of my confusion about the loop. I thought this building was one thing, and the loop was an addition, because Damien always said about the loop, we can't afford this, and we can't afford that because of the loop, never ascertaining that it affects the building.
Yeah, so I feel like I probably have to clarify something for you and why it was like maybe a little bit of confusion.
There's a lot of confusion. I know a little.
And I'm so sorry if this is going to confuse everybody, but with the original design for that middle school loop, middle school drive and the high school bus loop, we were actually only going to bid the middle school portion of that with the project, because that was all that we needed to make, your middle school complete. We could see that as a complete project. Those budgets started and those designs started to just kind of grow outside of the budget, and we just needed to figure out some way to make it kind of come back to center. So whenever you heard we're going to, bid it later, that's what we're talking about, kind of bidding the high school portion later than the middle school portion.
Where's the grant fall in at? Where did the grant fall in?
That's a good question. So an update for this board, and I'm sorry I didn't put it into the PowerPoint. So DCED is postponing their decision for multimodal transportation fund grants. They meet every other month. I know, Mrs. Wolfinger, I had the same reaction. So they're not meeting in December. They will now meet in January. So we hope to hear January if your district was awarded a portion of the MTF funding.
Dr. Lyman, I just jumped in so that you could go. No, you've waited longer.
So we have a lot more projects scheduled to build with you.
Yes.
And I really appreciate you coming out here with some numbers that are more specific than we've seen before. This is very helpful. I'm a social worker. This seems like more of a people problem. I mean, there's clearly a numbers problem, but there's also some people problems here. But I'm really interested in making sure we do better together, all of us, in the future, because we still have all these other projects to build. So just maybe specifically, like, are we learning from some of these mistakes? Specifically, do we know that the finance costs, are we budgeting those better in the future? And I think maybe Bill and Christy have talked about that already. And I think, as Bill hinted at earlier, when we are learning that the actual bids are coming in higher, what will the vehicle be for making sure the board knows that these overruns and these cost overages are happening? I really want a forward-looking explanation of how we won't make these same mistakes again, and how we'll be in a better place, say, for this high school project and then whatever else follows.
So Melissa's going to hand out a handout that I shared with Christy. So I don't want to be in this position again, and I kind of came through to this project towards the end and kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together, gathering this financial information for you, and that's why it took a little long, because trying to get everybody on the same page with the same numbers and I have the same understanding. So I have put this as a draft. It still needs some information in it, but this is a breakdown that can be updated monthly and reconciled monthly with your business department so that you know every month where you stand. If a project, when it comes into bid, it is always brought to the board, and it is the board's decision whether you go forward or not with that project, if it's over budget or not. We cannot award a project without the board awarding it. So I don't know what happened in the past, but I will assure you, you will know if this next project is a penny over budget, you will know. So like I said, I'm trying to break this down with Christy so it's easy for her and Joanne to use. We have had meetings with EI and K&W. I will tell you that their invoices have been confusing. I can see the frustration that the district had. I can see why the numbers were all over the place. I think we have now dialed that in. I think we have got them on the same page so that it is now clear of what bucket this money is coming from. And moving forward, like I said, I will make sure, I will give you my word that that will stay on track. Every month you will have an update, and I will make sure that if we are off, that Chrissy and I and Joanne know why it's off and get it taken care of. So I can tell you that moving forward. I, again, fortunately can't talk to a lot of the past.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think that in the contract, it explicitly states that, like, monthly we're supposed to have some kind of report, a progress report, and I guess that wasn't happening, and so I don't know, shame on us for not, mentioning it, but also, like, I guess this should have been happening, through the duration of the middle school project, that we should have been getting some kind of monthly report. Or, I mean, not, when I say us, I mean the business office. And so I guess what I'm hearing you say is, like, yeah, we're going to do that going forward, and we've got a system in place now to make that work effectively.
Yeah, and that monthly report typically refers to, like, throughout the phase of construction, you like to see a report, you see pictures, you see budget. So what we're now doing is we're taking that into your design phase, right? So you'll start to see that in much more detail throughout the course of the project. And I apologize for the small font on here. I think the next slide is essentially, it's this, what you're seeing. Now, there's a lot of smaller numbers that we've rolled out, but just for presentation purposes, this is generally what we were talking about for kind of next phase of design, where we're now very clearly identifying this is now your targeted budget for your next phase of additions at the high school. You can see the asset protection budget that we assigned, the additions, which you can choose a combination of in your budget to kind of build at $5.6 million. We have the site work accounted for, as well as the middle school additions. Those are those additional additions. This is phase 3, just to be clear, this is forward-looking for the next phase of construction. We have that parent loop and the soft costs, which the soft costs are what you see all down here, makes up the second half of your page. Now, because this is forward-looking, we were also taking into account the stadium project and the budgets that were set aside for the elementary school. And then we've carried over the 766 from this borrowing, kind of get you your total program funding. You can see for the funding amount, that 2023 borrowing, that 9.7, that takes into account your financing costs. So we have identified that, and we're now capturing it going forward. So you will never see a middle school budget ever again that does not have the financing costs associated with it.
So on this slide, Melissa, the thing that scares me the most, I'm just going to say that jumps out at me the loudest is probably that our targeted budget number and our funding amount are like identical. So what if, things are going haywire again? And how do you, what would be the process for that? I mean, I know we have contingency built in.
Yes.
Can you explain why those numbers are equal?
One side, your funding is how much you were told you have left. I believe your financial was here last Monday. It seems like you have a little bit more.
Right.
We kept it, we don't know if you want to put extra in the building, if you want to put it, or if you want to do something else with extra money. But what we did is we just backed out everything that was programmed, and that's how we came up with the 5.6 that you have for your additions, because that was our concern last Monday. The additions, there's maybe too many additions that are being designed, and if you want to stay within budget, you guys have to decide what your 5.6, what's that going to be? What additions is that going to be? So that's why they match, because that's all the money you have, and that's what you can get for that money.
I mean, I understand that. I guess, I don't know. I guess I just look at it a little bit differently. Like, maybe that should be like 31 million, right?
I guess one thing that I'm wondering
Am I the
is
only one that
why
thinks
that 361,000 from the interest is still included in that 766 when Mr. August presented regarding the ship taking shape, that interest was supposed to be set back for elementary schools in the next 3 to 5 years. So the fact that we are still at the same targeted and the funding amount, and that interest rate is still included in that number is also concerning. One other question or comment that I had was regarding line item number 8, regarding the reimbursables. And then on line 12 has permits and fees. In the contract with SiteLogic, it states that some of those permits and reimbursables are already included, and why those weren't actually budgeted for when the contract states that some of those reimbursables would be included. So why those weren't included, but were only included in the actual.
Let me just answer the question on the finance. So the interest, we were not aware that it was being put to ship take shape, or your finance person that was here last Monday also included that interest, I believe, in her report, is what she stated.
For future projects, not
Okay, well,
this one.
Okay, well, that was these future projects or other future projects?
Elementary.
It's not defined, it's just for future projects.
Mr. August had stated that those were to be towards elementary.
So that was a longitudinal, big picture path forward where we were all trying to look at how we could get there. So any numbers that we included were based on the conversations at that time.
And this includes your 3 million of your elementary schools in this budget, so I don't know if that's the same thing.
And
I mean, we're carrying it forward. We're not assigning it specifically to the high
Yeah.
school, middle school. We're just saying that this is what you have: the 450, and then the 360 or whatever. Your interest plus what's left from the $14.3 million. However, wherever, whenever you choose to spend it is fine. We're not saying it has to go to the next phase of construction, but we are just capturing your remaining funds available to put towards construction.
I believe that my understanding is like that was kind of the money that we were drawing off the interest rate, because we're kind of paying that. So it's
Sure.
like our money that we could maybe delegate towards, and that was my understanding that it was, moving forward, because there is 3 million, as we can see, I mean, to address elementary schools with all of the design fees isn't really going to get us that much.
If I could just jump in, remember we were piecemealing the elementaries. We were going to take some money from this borrow. I think there's an additional borrow that sends off some funds, if I'm correct. Some of our own money that we have in fund balance, we were dedicating that to that. So it was truly a piecemeal to get to a number to do the elementary projects.
Yeah, so the interest rates, or the money that we made off the bond proceeds with interest, I know that may have been a topic of like, hey, sit this back for elementaries, but it also came up with this board, because we never voted on where to allocate it, came up about how PFM had told us through the course of our borrowings that we could make as much as about $1 million, hopefully, off of it, based off like a 3.5% interest rate. So it was actually, I remember this board having conversations about that money could go toward the parent loop or elementary. So like I know how it's like listed there, but really at the end of the day, it's our decision as to what we decide to do with that interest, whether it's to this project or that. We haven't taken any formal vote.
And to your point, Mrs. Wolfinger, we do have to make the $5.6 million decision about what we're doing at the high school. I believe we're at the phase of the project where more direction to our construction managers on exactly what that project is saves us additional design fees.
Yes.
So we have to make some hard choices on what we do at the high school, and if it is the board's desire to have more wiggle room based on the budget, that's a choice we have to make.
Is it, again, social worker, not accountant? So we have this interest that we've earned, and if we spend it on one project, is it possible that then that will just save some money on that project, which then could roll into the next project? I mean, like a pig going through a python?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's just the potential for,
Yes.
I mean, there's potential for everything. There could be the
Yes.
potential for overruns. There could be the potential for making smart. So it's
Yes.
all a little bit unpredictable, but
Yes, but
ultimately,
if there is interest earnings on any borrowing that you would like to allocate for a piece of your construction projects, you can capture it here. It doesn't have to be that full amount. It can be a portion. It doesn't even have to be shown this way, but so we can show it however you'd like. I think that, just for our discussion purposes from last week and this week, it was, we were just showing interest earnings as part of what could be carried over to the next phase of construction.
So my question from a couple minutes ago, I remember having a conversation with Damien where he had indicated that the grant monies were included in the budget. And I remember him and I having a conversation about whether that was the right strategy or not. Was the grant included in the budget? Yeah, number, like assuming that we were going to get it.
The grant that we didn't get.
Right.
Grant that we didn't get. We at SiteLogic were not ever really counting on that as a definite. We were hopeful for it. We were optimistic. We lobbied really hard that Shippensburg would be a recipient of that grant, but it was just not a part of the original budget. And because we couldn't depend on that, we couldn't account for it anywhere as part of the budget. What we're hoping for this round is we're seeing a lot more responsiveness, interest in, your grant application, lots of really encouraging signs. We've heard that there's been a lot of lobbying on behalf of the school district for this, and politically, everybody is hearing you express your desires for this. So we're seeing a lot of momentum with this grant application than we had in the previous one. So we're hoping, again, we're not counting on it, but we're hoping that that will kind of come to fruition with the next award.
I sort of disagree with that, not with you, but with the assessment. Damien pretty much said that the grant, with the grant and our money, would do the loop, okay? And then the grant money didn't come in, correct? So the money we had set aside for the loop, you said you spent it in other places within the middle school?
Did we set a, no, yes,
We put cash.
that's your,
We put cash with the grant, right?
yeah. So that's the, and I'm so sorry, I'm just trying to kind of
No, I'm sorry, I'm
scroll
jumping around, but
up here. Here's slide 6, there we go. So that's it, okay? So if you look at that $2.3 million budget, that's kind of the placeholder for your loop budget. Unfortunately, because of all of those budget disruptions that we talked about, that's what was starting to eat away at that budget that was kind of set aside for it, for the loop.
so that money, none of the loop money was spent on the building itself. It just ate the loop money out. The money set aside to do something was just eaten up by cost and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what you're seeing
So
tabulated at the bottom. Yes.
So going
as-
forward, the money that you've budgeted for the loop doesn't take into account a possible grant. And
No.
if we were to receive a grant, it would just be like bonus money that then could be rolled over into something else.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the best term I've heard for a budget is bonus money. So we'll just kind of earmark it that way because I think that would be phenomenal. I would really love for you to get some bonus grant money.
how much are we? Are we over at all at the middle school? We're just 70 or 766 or whatever. So we haven't spent more than we should at the middle school. That what you're telling me?
Did you ask that question again? I don't know if I
Middle school.
understood.
The middle school we had 14.3.
Yes,
So we have spent everything except the 766, I think. The middle
Yes.
school money.
yes.
And the rest of the money you use other places within the middle school.
And the balance of that, okay, so yes, that is what you see at the bottom of your sheet. So all of those costs that are being kind of tabulated there is where the parent loop money or parent loop budget was kind of getting eaten away at,
Okay, so 405 is what we had left over, not counting the interest. Take the interest out of that.
right?
So we are. Why people keep telling me about we're 1.4 million or 1.9 million over? Do you understand that? Why we would be that, or because that don't make sense to me here.
It's the difference between the actual cost of your project and the remaining funds, not including the interest earnings.
So we haven't lost any money. We just haven't got to buy it. We just haven't got the loop.
Yeah, I mean, we're still within the borrowing and the budget, the original budget. You're still within that 14.3, okay? What you didn't get was the parent loop because now there is not enough money left in the construction budget to fulfill construction for your middle school loop.
And who authorized the money this money to be spent here? Down here, you said it was spent to the place.
These are all costs that were incurred throughout the course of the project.
We as a board authorized that.
So, I mean, they would have been submitted throughout the course of the project and in different ways. Additional services, there are invoices that had to be approved by the board.
I don't recall all of those invoices coming to us for approval.
So I
We
think,
did certain change orders, but there are certain other ones, especially I'm not sure if you answered the question regarding the reimbursable expenses when they're with the permits, fees, and other, when all of those in the contract are listed under reimbursable expenses that had no budget for, only in the actual that we were shown in the closing out.
Sorry, which line items are you talking about?
8 and.
Okay, so 8 and 9, so there's, I mean, whenever we set the budgets, okay, for a project, your professional services and soft costs are typically assigned a percentage, right? So we maybe don't know what that's gonna be, but it's like, I think in this case, probably 8% of the construction cost. So we're not, those are typically wrapped up within kind of the overall construction, the overall contract value. These are additional services that were incurred throughout the course of the project. So like when we talk about professional design services that were needed to clarify a change order, which is a change to the design on the project. If your architect and your engineer need to create a drawing or a design detail, they need to get paid for that. And that's what you're seeing.
Your architect and engineer gets 7% of all your change orders, all your contract. So that number is 7% of 92,000 change orders that were issued in the public bid. Your architect
So I think that then number 11 is a line item for change order contingency. So it's kind of like, everything's kind of like some of these soft costs. Some of them are laid out in the contract, like under reimbursable. I'm not trying to like keep beating a dead horse about
that's
in
fine.
the past.
Now,
Moving forward, Dr. Goetz on July 10th made note of, and he made a statement that, if we're going to, if the trend is to see a 10% kind of overage, do these numbers identify that 10%?
Yeah.
What we've seen
Yes.
with the 9% here?
Yes.
So these, regardless of the targeted and the funding being
Yes.
exactly the same,
yes,
and this has in contingencies?
Yes.
So this,
yeah, so what you're seeing, like all the soft costs that are kind of rolled up into your soft costs for above, that $5.2 million number, okay, that very last soft cost for above number, 5.2 million, the second half of that sheet, that's what you're now seeing, okay? That's what makes it up. And those contingencies are generous because the design is still coming into focus. So once your design gets a little bit more developed, then we can develop your soft costs a little bit more clearly in line with the project.
Rochelle, I do just want to say I really do appreciate your remediation on this and like making sure that like there's a plan moving forward. It's very helpful. I really appreciate it.
Can I ask a question? You guys have other projects beyond ours going on right now. What are you seeing in your crystal ball on those projects? The steel leveled out, AC, structure, are we still seeing inflationary numbers?
I can tell you, I just got a notice that steel is going up for this month, and it's going up on January 2nd.
Can you talk in your microphone when you're answering things? It's just we have so many people at home and they're going to be sad if they don't hear your voice.
So I just got notice again that steel is going up at the end of November.
Okay.
And it's going up again January 2nd. It's another price increase.
All right.
Things are still going up. Things
Yeah.
are starting to level off, but it's still going up and down right now. But like I said, it's
Some of the companies I work for are now starting to lower their bid process because they're not able to capture as much work. I was wondering if you had started to see a decrease in some of the stuff. Yeah, that was just what I was trying to see where we were.
Sorry, Mr. Nagel, I don't know if I heard what you said. Some companies that you work with are,
I work with large contractors.
Yep.
They're starting to lower their bids to capture work because the competition's got a lot stiffer. Work
Yes.
is starting to slow up,
yeah.
and their numbers are starting to drop. I was just wondering if we were seeing that in our realm yet. That's okay. It was just
Yeah,
a
yeah,
crystal ball.
yeah. I mean, we bid out over $500 million of public school construction in the last year throughout the state of PA. So we are pulling all of that data and applying it directly to your projects that we're seeing. I think Rochelle and I both demanded it pretty ardently that we really focus on aligning budgets and scopes and market conditions with your next phase of projects.
I have a couple questions. Line item number 2 on the middle school additions, the ESSERS originally was 4.3 million. The actual came in at 3.4. So where's the 803,000 of ESSER money?
Yeah. So what the middle school additions are, okay, is a combination of public bid construction, so your additions, in addition to a GISA amendment, which is that 2.188403. Okay? So difference is aligning what we had to do for your additions. We were hoping all of your additions, MEP, general construction, could all be bid out publicly. But when we did our final estimate, we saw that that wasn't going to be the case. That's when we started to pull a little bit of that work into the second GISA amendment. So you have equipment costs within your ESSERS funding that got paid for. You have professional services, so construction management, architecture, engineering. Some of those professional services were also paid out of your ESSERS.
Okay, and then second question. So line items 8 and 9 that weren't originally in budget, but then were actual, I understand they were from change orders. What change orders specifically were those for?
Most of those were due to the water vault and the sewer pump. I think there were
That where the terracotta was found?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And some of those additional services are also, because the middle school project was, the parent loop was still tied to this, so those additional services are also redesigned for your middle school parent loop.
And then just to go back to a question Ms. Eberly had asked earlier about the ARM for Site Logic.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever kind of dove into her answer
Okay.
as far as for the GISA goes.
So I will now answer that question. I've been hearing a lot of questions, and I'm sorry, I don't know my time. Mr. Goetz, you're usually pretty good about that, and I apologize.
Midnight if needed.
Yeah, you just keep going until the board's satisfied. I don't
Okay.
have any time limit on it, but
So,
some of us might get bored and leave. I don't know.
okay, so we can get into a hybrid construction approach, which is what we utilized here at Shippensburg. We used it across the state. But I'm just going to do, this is a little bit of contractor school, okay? So imagine you have your imaginary hard hats on and you're going to contractor school. So here what is kind of a model of what the traditional public bid looks like. It is the lowest responsible bidder, and you can see this is where the owner holds all of the contracts, okay? And everything kind of is flowing through the owner, and you can see through the mechanical, the general, the electrical, we see that little sign that says incentives, okay? That is essentially capturing, let's say, change orders on a project. They're incentivized to kind of, to have those sorts of, thank you. They're incentivized for different reasons, but a lot of it comes down to change orders on a project. Through the GISA model, which is what you're seeing here and is pretty representational of how we appear at Shippensburg, you can see the owner is holding the contract with the architect, and Site Logic is the construction manager and your energy services contractor. This is what we say is our kind of client-focused professional services. This is why I'm here more frequently than anybody else talking to you, is because through your ESCO and your construction management contract, we have a lot of responsibility on your project. And we can get into this a little bit, but what is GISA procurement? Is anybody familiar with this? I think I heard that question. last time I was here, but it is a project delivery method that focuses on the improvement of capital infrastructure and services by energy services companies. It's also referred to as performance contracting, but big takeaways are the energy and cost savings achieved through the GISA are guaranteed over a specified period of time. So in Pennsylvania, those contract terms and those that length of guarantee is for 20 years from the completed date of installation. So as of 2016, GISA projects no longer have to be self-funding, and the cost savings from your utility reduction do not need to fully fund the project. What is important and significant about this is now this becomes a very, very powerful procurement method for the district. Why is procurement important for districts? Because you are no longer beholden to the lowest responsible bidder on a project. You now, through your energy services contract, are able to procure work through us, and we, on your behalf, are willing to negotiate at great lengths with subcontractors. Do not have the ability to negotiate on the public bid portion of a project. So the price that you get is the price that you get from your public bid, but through the energy services, we have that ability to negotiate. This is maybe most clearly seen on line 3, GISA Amendment 1, where we were setting that budget at 6.5. We were able to negotiate and come back at 6.3. So significant savings for the district. Thank you. So what are the energy conservation measures? We've talked about them a lot. You're familiar with them because of the work that we've done in your building. But primarily, there are these 19 categories that are eligible scopes of work. And they are typically your HVAC, electrical, your plumbing equipment, your building envelope, which is the exterior skin of your facility, doors, windows, roofs, facade, storefront, and then indoor air quality improvements. Thank you. So these energy conservation methods, I've just highlighted here, is, just to go a little bit deeper, is related work that is needed to improve the systems, is also permissible under the GISA legislation. We call this the 15% rule, okay? So on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is a picture of the actual law as it appears. And what the 15% rule allows is, the state was pretty smart. They said, hey, if you're in this library and you need to fix your air handling unit, but you have to touch your ceiling, we'll allow you to do that. Even though the ceiling is not, HVAC, it's touching it. It's connected to it. We know you have to touch that to get to your air handling or anything. So we're going to include, you have kind of like this 15% umbrella that you're able to work within to make sure that all of this work gets done properly and in place. So what are energy cost savings as they relate to the GISA? So there are two types of energy cost savings. There is the very straightforward savings that result from the implementation of an energy conservation measure, right? So anytime that you're replacing, upgrading your equipment or any of those ECMs, those 19 ECMs, you're going to see an energy savings. But then there's energy-related cost savings, which is a cost saving that results from implementing your ECM, but it's also the avoided or planned capital expenses from having to maintain that. So if you have like a leaky faucet and it keeps running and running and running, you are incurring costs because you have to maintain it. It's wasting energy, it's wasting water. There's a cost associated with that. So if you fix that, you're avoiding that cost, and that's what part of those energy-related cost savings are. What does GISA cost savings look like at Shippensburg? Well, some of you may or may not know, we've been in your district doing energy savings since 2011. This is probably news to some of you because that was a very long time ago. It predates a lot of us. But 2011, what you're seeing here is from our report that we provide to the district to guarantee your energy savings. And you can see, just summarize it, and that's why there's a big red box around it. So as a result of the ongoing guaranteed energy savings agreement, Shippensburg has realized over $3.5 million in energy savings, and you have exceeded the total estimates by over $647,000 for the past 11 years. Okay, so for the past 11 years, that is our guaranteed savings for you. If we miss one of these guaranteed energy savings that we are showing you, if we provided less savings than that, then we would have to write you a check for the difference. We have not had to do that, thankfully, but what you can see is your middle school additions and renovations. Your 20-year savings guarantee is $375,000. So that'll be in addition to your guaranteed savings for the past 11 years. Just to contextualize this for you, it's a 25-page report we provide to the district. If anybody would like a copy of our energy savings report, we can give it to you and you can look at it. And that just kind of leads us into what is the hybrid construction, right? It is just coordinating your public bid with your GISA, combining these two different procurement methods. Thanks. Here are some reasons why. And is this 18? Thanks. Why is it a good use? There's the use of preferred subcontractors. These are, again, you're not getting Joe Schmo off the street, who's your lowest responsible bidder. You're getting quality contractors that are vetted by us, that the district prefers to use. We work with them because they're either familiar with your buildings, you like the service that they're providing, and you'd like to continue to have them work within your buildings. As Rochelle stated, there are no change orders on GISA scopes of work. So you might have had a $3.4 million public bid construction. You had a small portion, you had change orders on that. You had 0 change orders on the over $7 million for your GISA. The risk mitigation that it provides is really litigation. You're avoiding that. The construction contingency is another thing. We're reducing the construction contingency. And that is, if you actually refer to this sheet, you'll see that. It's a budget that we carry. It's 4% of the construction costs. And right now, for your future middle school, your future high school and middle school, we are showing a 4% construction contingency of $311 and $311,216. That is with the assumption that you'll be pursuing a hybrid approach in the next phase of construction. If you do not choose a hybrid approach, this construction contingency is going to go up, because we are no longer assuming the risk as your ESCO, and now you have to increase your budget to account for your construction contingency, and you will see this bottom line probably double, because now you have construction contingency on a general, a mechanical, electrical, and a plumbing, whereas your mechanical, electrical, and plumbing are all under us, and we assume all of that risk and we hold that contingency. That's how we help you kind of reduce your construction costs. We have a condensed schedule. I think you saw that this summer with the middle school project. We are able to really drive the construction schedule through a hybrid approach. By having the MEP under us, we are able to coordinate and drive the schedule to, first day of school, instead of have it kind of trail off and linger longer. We have better collaboration with our contractors on site. And again, the ability to negotiate and de-scope with subcontractors cannot be overstated. That is incredibly important, especially now when we're seeing all of these cost overruns. You want to be able to have that ability. when we talk about enhanced post-project services or perpetual care, we stay within your buildings for 2 years after it's complete. We're in your buildings, we're looking at your equipment, making sure everything is operating the way that it should. We want to guarantee your energy savings, so it's important for us to constantly be within your facilities.
Can I ask
So,
a question
yes.
regarding, so when you're talking about monitoring and comparing our energy savings, are you looking at our bills of what
Yes.
the business office is paying out?
Yes.
How much energy?
Yes.
Temperatures in the
Yep.
building?
Yeah, we're probably annoying about how much we request it, and the district is so responsive, and we appreciate it because it really depends on the district to be able to provide us that information. But we are looking at all of your utility costs, how you're using your utilities, what type of utilities you're using. And then, for the next phase of construction, we're going to have recommendations on what changes you could make that will better provide energy savings for you. Yeah, that's a big piece of that, and we'll have that next month. So we talked a lot about these, and just wanted to just hit on a couple high notes, making sure you understand your construction manager tasks, what those expectations are, and also, that, sorry, did you advance it to 20? How we look at your project as construction manager and ESCO. So construction manager and then your ESCO contractor. And there's very little bit of overlap, but they're two very different roles that we fulfill here. Both we think are equally important. Both provide a lot of value to the district as far as construction. But we did talk about that reduced construction contingency. That's a big one. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. In addition to, and I'll just jump to that commissioning line item, if you weren't your ESCO contractor, you would have to pay for your buildings to be commissioned. That's included within our role as your ESCO contractor, which is also another $150,000, maybe $200,000. Okay, so that is GISA, ESCO type discussion. Happy to provide any more detail. I just kind of wanted to hit the high notes because I know it can be very confusing. But I think it's also important to note that we've been in your district for a long time, and we're constantly building on those projects that we started with.
That's another question is with GISA, like our bond is more than the 20 years. And the GISA needs to be paid back within 20. Are you checking with our business office?
Yeah, actually, Rochelle and Christy, I think, just worked on finalizing the draw schedule on how that could be phased.
That's for future projects. I sent over the schedule that you sent me for them to look at. However, the current bond borrowing, they are looking into because we could potentially be over.
What'd you say, Christy? I'm sorry, what'd you say?
So for future projects, I sent over the schedule that Rochelle had provided me, and PFM is looking into it to make sure that we will be in the right payback period. However, after the last board meeting, when SiteLogic presented, it was a staring glare at me that when you add up the GISA projects on line 3, 4, and 5, they total just over 8.4 million. And in the first bond borrowing for 2023, we only had, or 2022, 6.3, 6.5. So PFM is now looking into that.
What?
So GISA Amendment 3 is a deduct.
Right. Yes, but when you add the three together, the 6.3, the 2.81 million, and the deduct, you come up with a little over 8.4 million for all the GISA work.
So I think when they were asked about that, they were only given that first number, and they were never provided that second number.
I'm sorry, Joanne, can you clarify the first and second numbers?
When they were asked about if they were within the guidelines for Giza, when they asked for PFM, they were only given the $6.3 million number. And they had 6.5 in the borrowing, so you were under that. But then when the other two things occurred, it put us over for the first borrowing. So that's gonna roll over into the additional projects, which I do have concerns that the 8.9 projected for, the future projects will be over what we're allowed to have for Giza, because we have to have them paid back in the 20 years, and we have to borrow for 25 to get the maximum borrow capacity to be able to do the most of our projects. So they're looking into it. I mean,
We're
we
not
have to-
sure
we have
yet.
to
We'll have to
absorb
let you
that.
know.
Yeah, that has to
Yeah,
get absorbed somewhere.
Yeah, so that's the first time I've heard of like the two adding up to over. But I think that, as far as future borrowings, as long as the Giza portion of the project, right, is paid back within 20 years, then it satisfies the terms of Giza procurement. And can show what that looks like.
I don't know that there's any of that that can be taken out of the series of 2023 because of the athletic stadium. And I think that State Logic was projecting that they could take some of that for Giza out of the second borrowing. But if you take into account the money for the stadium, there's nowhere near the 8.9, which I know you said you were looking forward.
That's going to be, that's broken up between two.
Yeah, but the last one, with that being designated for elementary projects, I just don't know how this will all flow. It's too far out to say for sure, but
PFM is going to let us know that then? Is that what is
They're
that?
looking into
So,
it.
okay, so we'll get an answer from PFM.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that they have whatever they need to make sure that their borrowings or whatever their projections are kind of align with what the district has. So,
Can we go to the next step without knowing that? Should we go to the next step without knowing that?
Mr. Scott, we'll get advisement from PFM on the way forward.
Well, if PFM says, hey, here's your limit on Giza projects, then you set that limit, right? And then the projects that would have been Giza now become traditional bid, I would guess, right?
yeah, I think what we would have to do is take a look at the scope and how those projects can be bid out. What we want to make sure that we're doing is providing really attractive bid packages for potential bidders either way. And we can do that. We do it all the time.
Well, we used the parent loop for the savior for the first projects. What's going to be the savior for the next project that we can cut?
You're asking about, I think, alternates that will be made available as a way to get back to budget. So throughout this whole course of design, we've been looking at value engineering, how to build in a way that's much more fiscally responsive, and looking at the different components of the project and making suggestions to the architect and engineer to make sure that how we're building and what we're building are meeting the budgets that have been assigned to it. Now,
Didn't do that to the middle school.
no, we did to the best of our ability, but we were definitely fighting some pretty intense market conditions. In addition to that, I'd like to remind you that timing of those decisions was critical because of when we had to start construction. We delayed those decisions to this board as late as possible so that there was kind of a long runway leading up to the decision-making components of the project. So how we intend to do that in the future is the value engineering through the design, and then alternates. Not over-designed alternates, but alternates within your desired scope and how we will account for those to get back to budget. Whether it's finishes, whether it's pieces of the building that can be phased out later for construction, we'll have those options available to you. And we can show you how potentially you could get to budget on bid day if you need to.
How many, I guess, I don't know, contractors or whatever are do this Giza project? Is SiteLogic the only one that manages Giza projects, or like when we would have went out to bid for that, like was SiteLogic the only vendor available for Giza, or are there other people that also manage Giza projects?
There are other companies that are ESCOs throughout the state.
How many in this general area that would be working locally, like some of the?
I can't say for sure, but anywhere from maybe 2 to 3. But the process for being hired as an ESCO is not the same as going out to bid through public bid construction. We have to be hired through a RFP process, so request for proposal. So we respond to that, and that's how we were hired initially. And then through that process, we're able to bid the work. So it's not an apples to apples comparison on going out to bid and how you get hired. It's a different process.
Can I, I'm going to go back a little bit to the Giza issue. It seems to me that our financial folks at the end of the table here have some pretty valid reservations about our Giza projects and how many of them we can do and how much we can afford that are Giza. So again, I'm going to focus on the people side of things where I just want to be assured that between Rochelle and you, and that that will be covered, so that we're not facing financial difficulties because we've overextended ourselves on these Giza projects. So again, it's coming back to that kind of communication thing to make sure this happens in the future, and just some assurances that that will happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Superintendent, excuse me. Last board meeting, you were telling us about the finance. You said we had $33 million, as they show in this thing. But you felt that we didn't have that amount of money to complete the project. Would be 20. We have left in that for the whole project.
Could you say that again, Mr.?
They have on the thing $33 million left for this to use on this project, correct? And you thought we may not have enough money.
So I think, Mr. Scott, we're going to have to make value decisions at the high school. Okay, so given where the estimates are coming in, given how we do not want to spend money on design fees that we're reasonably not going to use, we really have to plant a flag as a board and give them direction on what we want to build. And that is within our budget. And if folks are leery about overages, then maybe we need to build some of that in as well. But at the end of the day, Fred, we're going to have to make those decisions on what we build moving forward at the high school to be within the budget. So when we entered this process, we talked about the LGI off the cafeteria. We talked about an expanded gymnasium. We talked about a lot of things. Through that design process and the estimating, as they've come back, we've seen that those numbers are above what we can afford. Okay, so it doesn't mean we can't get something. We have to prioritize what is the biggest bang for our buck for the high school project. So, administratively, we're in those discussions, and that design process is kind of leading us to that direction and to those conversations. We are very close to finishing that process so that I can bring forward and say, we've done all the legwork here based on the board's desires and our programmatic needs. This is what we think we should do. Now, Fred, you got to remember, we have $9 million of asset protection, which we didn't know what that number was going in. Okay, so if that came back at 5 million, then we're having a different conversation. Okay, so I was not aware until I saw that number for the first time that it was going to be $9 million. So that eats into our project for the classroom spaces and instructional spaces that we want. Okay, so once that number is set, That's the non-negotiable. We have to do that. So the $9 million out of that project, it's right off the top. So, that's why the loop is important. I'm sorry, that's why the grant is important, because that puts money back into the process, and we may be able to get these things. We may have to design things that aren't as shiny as we would like them to be initially in order to get the space constructed and then come back and do what we need to do there. So it is threading a needle for sure to get the biggest bang for our buck.
Do we still need to bid those jobs?
Yeah, so we.
What do you mean when you say bid those jobs? Because I'm thinking it could be two
I
ways.
was told different times that we couldn't eliminate anything until we knew what the bids process was. I think you told that we had to bid, then we could eliminate. But you couldn't.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
if you would like to make decisions based on the design development estimates, you can do that. Okay, so that's the next phase of estimates that are coming forth to the board that we are presenting. So the design is now changed a little bit, and you'll see those changes based on the estimates. If you want to bid everything out to see what it costs, if you want to know what it costs to build everything, then you wait until bid day where you get those actual costs. But if you do not want to pay for your architect and your engineer to design every single thing, if you want to start minimizing scope and really assign a base project, you can do that at the design development phase, which is next month.
All right.
So Fred, we're going to get numbers based on SiteLogic's estimates.
Okay.
Those estimates aren't bids.
I understand.
And then we have to decide which ones do we want of what we've designed, do we want to take to the next phase and pay someone to design to the point that we can put it out to bid. So there's this gap time where we have to make a decision on that project. Because as Melissa said, we could say, okay, throw all this out and maybe we get extremely lucky and everything comes in, but we will have spent design monies to do that. There's a cost to do that. Most of our conversations have really been around, we don't want to spend that money because we know that we can't afford the entire scope of what we want. So what can we afford and what do we want to send forward to get that level of design detail as efficiently as we can?
So the estimate comes in at a certain price, we look at it, we can't afford it. So we can pull off the sheet, right?
I would say that's probably, it's not when it's bid, but the next time we update your estimate.
Before it bid. If I'm looking down and see, like you said.
You'll have two opportunities, okay? And really, the design, the heavy lift for the design that your architects and engineers, they're like getting into this design development phase, okay? Because that's when they're gonna get structural engineer involved. That's when the MEP engineers, spend a lot of time designing everything. But if you are able to reduce the scope and what has to be designed, then you don't have to pay for it. And we'll hopefully get you to that decision in December when we show you the updated design development estimate.
So we are
our
coming to
goal.
the end of that phase, Fred.
Yeah.
We're going to tell EI to put their pencils down so that we can make a decision. And if the board says, yeah, we want to bid all of this stuff, we can do that. Spoiler alert, the administrative recommendation is not to do that because we will be wasting money on design fees. So I will lay out what the administrative recommendation is to the board from this design process, and we will have a healthy debate over what the board wants to include in that package. But something's got to be laid on the table for the board to see and chew on to see if that's what they want or this group wants.
That actually takes us to the next phase. Ms. DeLong, if you could kind of fast forward to 23. This is just us talking about everything we did. That's the next steps that we have to kind of notice on. Okay, so your design development estimate presentation will occur next month. That will trigger your prioritization conversation where you're looking at your base bid project, so your core project, and any potential alternates that you would like designed, and then also voting to proceed to the next phase of design, which is the construction document phase. And then January, we're developing everything. We are still estimating up until that point when it starts to go out to bid, February, end of February, beginning of March. And I think, because this is a helpful visual, I just have included it. So you know when you have to start making those decisions to proceed to the next phase, from one phase of design to the next.
So Melissa, it strikes me that you've done a marathon presentation here. You've been there for 2 hours, and we really appreciate it. And I'm sort of reading the body language of the board, and it seems like they may have sort of reached the end of their patience, but I want to give everybody the opportunity to ask any additional outstanding questions that they might have and see if those can be resolved before we dismiss.
So, on the next project, when you do something like the phase of that, can you tell us, yes, you're going to pay for this? Yes, you're going to pay for that? Yes, you're going to pay for that?
I will make sure that your architect and engineers are abundantly clear about what is an additional service to be paid for beyond what is within the realm of your contract.
I
Be
appreciate
able to
it.
make sure. And actually, that's a really good note. That is probably part of that monumental exercise that Rochelle went through with Christy and Joanne, was to go back through every single invoice that the architect and engineer and any other professional service, including SiteLogic, was providing to the district. She went through every single invoice and made them clarify which project, which contract amendment each invoice is attached to, so that Christy and Joanne could then say, this invoice needs to be paid out of this specific bucket of money. And she provided that service at no additional cost to the district because we value our relationship with this school district. We'd love to continue it. We're working really hard to provide a lot of transparency, clear communication. I love coming to these board meetings because I enjoy seeing you and hearing the dialogue and the conversation. And I want to continue that for as long as you'll have SiteLogic in your district, which I hope is for a very long time. So if there are follow-up questions for additional resources, information, please get those to Mr. August, and I will respond to them however, in whatever capacity is needed. Thank you.
I have two.
Yeah, go ahead.
So first, can we get the PowerPoint sent to us?
Yes, you can just keep the USB. It's just on here, and Mr. Stevens can provide that
We
to
can
you.
have that. That would be super helpful. And then second, this is more direct to Mr. August. And I'm just going to share my concern is that the $33 million, I know we got to whittle that number down. It's going to be walking a tightrope. My fear ultimately is, and I'm not going to be around for it, so boo-hoo, I'm going to cry a little. But it's the $3 million for elementary. My ultimate fear is what is the plan if, things continue to skyrocket? We only have $3 million set aside for elementary. $3 million we know is not going to be near enough amount of money to cover the projects that we need to undertake. And so what is the plan for us to, before we say yes to these projects,
So just
have a plan in place?
So just remember, you are correct. The whole ship takes shape plan is on a tightrope. Okay, so there's not a lot of wiggle room around. So remember, $3 million from the bar. We're trying to get to a certain number for construction, depending on how many classes and what we choose to build at the elementary schools, which is an entire different discussion. So between the $3 million borrow, remember we're not at our borrowing limit. So we have our debt ceiling that we pay This borrow is going to get us close to, but not exactly at that limit. So we will have to spend some time continuing to accrue that difference between our borrow actual and our debt service limit that we're paying ourselves. We've been able to do a lot of great things. Our facilities have suffered, but as we improve our facilities, we will still have that cushion. So the original plan was to squirrel that money away over a number of years, pull some funds that we've had in the district from our fund balance, and some dedicated, monies that were put, Chrissy, what's the name of that ship? Proud?
Flagship round.
Okay, so we still have those monies designated. So it is truly a hodgepodge of financial means to get there. And it is the most unclear part, okay, which it makes sense as the last phase of our construction efforts. Having said that, we have to, we're on a tightrope, okay? And when we've had this conversation and we've made decisions here that we know can impact that last phase, we have to take that into consideration with this decision. Whatever decision we make here is going to either put it on it's going to put it on a certain timeline, okay? What we choose to build, how much space we have to add on at each building will be another factor. So, I hope that answers your question of that's the fuzziest part out, but at least there's mechanisms in place to get there. But every decision closes off other pathways and sets us on, a destiny at the elementary level.
I just don't, for me, I don't see how you can wait 5 more years. To do something for elementary, there's no way possible in the school district we can keep waiting. So I don't know as a board member how you make that decision of what you're saying yes to in the project list before you know what those numbers are. How do you say, yes, I'm building all of these things, but 5 years from now we might build something in elementary, but we don't know what it's going to cost. How do we know when we're going to lock ourselves out of money?
Well, I hear that the direction of the board since my arrival has been middle school, high school, elementary. And if that changes, then it changes. We spent a lot of resources preparing for the high school project that, at this point, I don't know, we're at the point of no return, but those numbers are certainly going to change. Even though we have the drawings and a plan, those numbers are going to change, if we don't act on them now, and I would doubt that they're going to be in our favor.
Yeah, and I can say, because again, I've been sitting in the audience for many years now, that 2019, the list of projects in the order kind of probably made sense, but things have changed since 2019. The growth in our area has changed. And so I don't know that list of how they're prioritized makes sense anymore in 2023 into 2024. So just some food for thought.
When are we going to do that? When are we going to sit down and make that decision?
So I think in December or January, we're going to be back here with high school base bid options. And the board's going to have to say, this is a bigger priority. The administration and SiteLogic have worked on with building principals to try to prioritize what we make the base bid. Now, the board may disagree, but any combination of work that we do has a finite number to it. So, we just have to figure out, for lack of a better, which Lego blocks we're going to stick together and put out the bid. And I said that that's coming, Fred, in the next couple months. If it's the board's will to go in another direction, so be it. But that's the path we're on, and that's where we're at.
You keep saying we got to make decisions. I just want to know why we got to wait to make decisions.
So Fred, the reason why we have to wait is we have to go through this design process. So we are looking at what the board said they wanted, which was a lot, which was needed. I'm not saying we would love to have all that stuff. And through this process, we have whittled it down to get it to a place where we have the ability to fit it within that $5.6 million line item, okay? Because of $9 million of asset protection. Okay, so that process takes a while, and you know, we're giving feedback, they're coming back and narrowing scope and changing designs to try to get the biggest bang for our buck, and give the board the most options, you know, that we can get with our money. So, like, I understand the impatience. You know, we've got to get. You know, I've always told the board about getting you to decision points. Okay, so you're coming up on a decision point, but there's a ton of back end legwork that it takes for us to get a clean decision point to the board to be able to make that. Okay, and you know, you can look at all of them and say, you know, if it's the majority's like none of this is good, we'll go back to the drawing board. But time is a factor, and every time we go back to the drawing board, someone's meter is running. Okay, so we have to remember that.
Isn't that what we're doing, every design? Are we paying for that design each time?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the process, Fred. But the longer we do that, you know, we can.
More cost.
You know, we're narrowing this down. At some point, we have to say pencils down.
Said that a long time.
So that we can get to a decision point for the board.
Okay.
Levi, any last comments, questions?
Yeah, well, so first of all, thank you. That was great. Thank you. That was great. And I guess, like, I get it. We have tons of needs. Like, when I first decided to run for this school board seat, which looking back was crazy to do, but one of the things that I remember getting information from, because these projects had started then, and one of the big things, I'm like, you know, Joe Wachter showed me his little book, the Site Logic book with all of the feasibility studies, and I looked at it, and then, you know, you look at the asset protection that Mr. August has talked about, kind of ran a campaign on addressing those issues, that, like, we can't have our school using these electrical circuit boards and all this stuff from 1970, and, like, wow, we're really outdated. Like, this stuff has to get fixed. So 100%, like, count me in. Like, these things have to get fixed. We can't risk our kids not being able to come to school because we have such outdated facilities. So I totally agree. Like, elementary stuff, like, we really need to be able to make some decisions. I also, when I came on the board, was like, wow, it'd be super cool. I'm a former basketball coach. We could get a brand new gym, and those numbers were like 20 million, and then I shortly realized that that was never going to happen. So, you know, I think we have a really good idea of what our needs are. I think that administration has done a good job in, like, scaling us back step by step and being realistic with us. I think sometimes as a board member, I've been a little more optimistic than I should have been, but I think we have a good scope on what we need to do, and we just need to get to that decision point. And as you recall, I said this because I'm a basketball geek. Many times I've said, you know, the great John Wooden once said, "Be quick, but don't hurry." and through this entire process, like, a lot of these, you know, surprises, as I reflect back, probably shouldn't have been surprises, because, you know, this project and all of this stuff takes a lot of time. You know, ideally, we maybe go faster in a perfect world, but it doesn't necessarily always happen like that. And then I think you see, you know, the effects of, you know, things outside of just Shippensburg, you know, the inflationary times we live in, and understanding all of those things that have an impact on us. And yeah, so again, great presentation. It was quite long, but I enjoyed it. I hope everybody took something positive from this, and I'm ready at that decision point to move forward. That's it.
Jim, any comments, questions?
My only comments, in my opinion, we need better communication, period, with everything. I mean, some things I was aware of, some things I wasn't. I just think we need better communication between everybody. That's it.
Kirk?
Has Site Logic provided all the information that we required, Christy and Joanne?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, what was that, Kirk?
Have you gotten all the information from Site Logic that you requested? We need.
Well, we had a meeting today. I mean, there are still some things they're working through.
But not quite yet,
Right.
but it's coming. Okay. That's it.
Charlie? Comments, questions?
No. It was a good meeting.
No parent loop.
Michael?
I was out of the room. Are we doing board comment?
Yeah,
kind of
just,
things,
I
like
just want to
summing
give
up?
everybody a chance to
I should
have their piece if they.
talk for a really long time so nobody gets to go home. No, thank you very much. I agree with Charlie. I think this was it was a helpful meeting. I appreciate the details, the numbers. I would just hope that, I'll second what others have said. We need to work well together and communicate as much as possible with the important people who understand numbers in our district, and the important people who understand construction at SiteLogic, and the important people who understand numbers at SiteLogic. And I guess we're important too. Just so this goes well, I would love to be part of the board that finally gets some really meaningful construction and changes done to the infrastructure of this district. So let's move forward as professionals and make a lot of progress.
Steph?
Just thanks for being here. You were up there for a really long time, and thanks for coming back. Rochelle, again, thank you for your remediation. I know you kind of stepped into the kitchen when it was kind of getting a little hot and tried to kind of put out some fires, and I definitely appreciate your contribution to, trying to bring us all back together, get us the information that we needed. I liked the healthy dialogue. Everyone had a chance to speak, and everyone remained respectful, so I really did appreciate just kind of everyone kind of hearing everyone out and listening to concerns and answering to the best of your ability, so thank you for that.
And I'll just add, thank you. I appreciate the time and the energy that you put into the presentation. This I think, meets the expectations, at least my expectations, about what I needed to see to get this closed out. I think, the business office may still have a few concerns, and I want to make sure that those concerns are addressed, but it sounds like we're on it. SiteLogic, thank you so much for being here, and thanks to all of the staff folks also who had to give up their Friday, or I'm sorry, what day is it? Monday evening for this, and y'all can. I'll apologize to my wife publicly for this meeting. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've been called a school board. My wife's calling herself a school board widow right now. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.